As you look at the front part of the house or any roof line, you have certain returns that go back, but your main important focus is the front. You want the lights typically to be centered, especially when it's a shorter run. So as we measure that, you're going to have a factory end, and it's going to be 4.5 from the center of the light, 9 inches between the full light. And so when you start with that, if you go and put it in your section, this one's 53.5 inches, it lands right on the corner, as you can see, which is way close to my light. And it also doesn't look uniform because this one's going to be super close to the corner. The other one's going to be 4.5 inches off. So what we want to do is we want to compensate for that and just take off a few inches off of that factory edge, which is going to push the light. So now we have more of an even reveal, one light 2 inches from the end, the other light 2 inches from the end, to center up our lights rather than it being way off and having a light far back from the corner and hard to reach around the corner. Let's just move that down. Let's center it up. Let's cut off a little bit off our factory end and mark it on our other end so that way we can have it nice and even. So left and right snips are the best way to get this done. A plastic speed square so it's not marking up your track. So we're going to take those marks that I made earlier and we're just going to draw straight across. Some guys will eyeball it. It just makes your cuts more crooked. Just take the extra time, use a speed square. Then I take my snips and I'll cut on the sides of the track down to the line, cut on the other side down to the line, and then you can just bend this back and forth to break it off. Breaks pretty easily. So now we've got our first mark done, and the measurement we made was 50.5 inches. And so what we're going to do now with our newly cut is we're going to measure down our track to 50.5 inches. And because we already compensated for how close we were to the light, we should be fine. We'll go ahead and make our mark there. Got plenty of room for that light to fit. Take our speed square, make our straight mark across, and then take our snips and cut each side and break it off. Now, a quick side note is if you take your snips and you clamp all the way down, it is going to crease the metal. If you're trying to make a long straight cut, you clamp all the way down, all on your snips the whole way through, it makes this jagged cut and it doesn't look good. So what you want to do and get in the habit of doing is almost coming completely closed and then moving your snips up and doing it again, and then moving your snips up and doing it again to make a nice clean cut edge that doesn't have a bunch of jags in it. So now from this corner, our track is coming in from that back side like that. The other side, same thing's coming into the back side. It's going to fall right into our track. So we know that we need to take out this back side of the track. Now, I do these marks because a lot of times you'll get it backwards when you're laying on the ground trying to do your cuts. So take your 45 and do your mark, making sure that you know which is the side you're taking out so you don't do it in reverse and then waste a piece of track. So now we're going to take our snips, do almost the same thing. We're going to cut down the side and then bend that flat so we can get in there. Now, I take my snips, see how I can't get in there? A lot of rookies will make a mistake of turning their snips sideways and trying to cut. It's just going to jack up the track and mess up your snips. Take your other left-handed snips out and boom, it'll fit right in and allow you to make much better cuts. A lot easier just having that extra left and right snips in your bag. And then if you do mess up and make it a little bit jagged, just go back through and clean it up, making all your work look clean and finished. Now we'll go on to the other side, same thing. We made our 45, we know which side we're taking out. We'll make a nice cut, clean it up, and now we're done with the 245-degree cuts. Now we have to worry about the piece of track that's coming in. So we'll fit it in there. As you can see, we want to make sure that our wire can reach all the way around that corner of the next light. So be careful before you get all gung-ho about making these cuts. You might want to test that because you might have to shorten up this corner. For this one, we actually did have to shorten it up because the light wouldn't make it around. So we just took off a little bit and now that light should be able to reach. So when we do have the light in, it'll run right into that flap right. So basically simple and easy. we're going to take that flap out so that way the wire can go around that corner. So we'll cut the flap out, and then what we do is what we call a window cut. It just makes a little window in it for the light to get around, and then I just snip off the little front corners so you don't have any jagged edges, and it makes it so nothing's sticking out to make that a nice tight fit. Now you do want that flap there. You don't want to cut it off at a 45 because you're going to put a zip screw in the bottom side that's going to grab that piece of flap to hold that corner together nice and tight, because these things do heat and they do warp when they heat and cool, and so you want to make sure that these corners are nice and tight. So there you go, your nice little 45-degree angle, and now we can hang it up. Okay, I got my window cut here, and there's two ways you can do it. You can take a measuring tape and measure, or you can flip the piece of track and put it up against your stopping point, and then just go ahead and mark where it needs to end. From there, now you know that's the exact distance you need. Now, if that is my end piece, I'm not going any further past that. I'm actually going to go 3/4 of an inch past my mark to make what we call an end cap for the track. This just seals up the end of your track nicely. If this is an exposed end, it makes the install just look a lot more complete and better. So I'm cutting 3/4 of an inch past my cut mark, breaking that off. And usually when they're right on a light, they're gonna break funny, but it's okay. I'm gonna go through and just clean that cut up real quick. And then now on that 3/4 of an inch, I'm gonna make a cut on each side. And then I'm gonna fold that in. And now you can use your fingers or you can use a pair of pliers. You're going to fold that up and make a nice little end cap for your track. And now that one is set and ready to go and be put up into place. Now you set that up in there. We're going to make sure it fits all nice and snug. And I always recommend testing your pieces out before you go ahead and start putting lights in and throwing them up. It's a lot harder to manipulate them with lights. Now this was a little bit long. I don't want it too tight, and so I have to cut a little bit off that front and then make sure that I can set my other track in. So we're gonna go to our wiring. This is the home run wire. There's a lot of extra slack here. You do want slack because if you mess up, you want to have the ability to be able to fix it and cut some extra wire off. You don't want to be so short that you screw yourself. You can always shove extra wire up and in. You also don't want too much that it extends your home run. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and snip these off. These are quick snips. They're amazing. Get some if you don't have some. We only use 3 of the wires. We use white, red, and black. The green is just left as a backup just in case something goes wrong. A wire gets cut. Now make sure your arrows are facing the correct direction on your light, so that way you're not installing them the wrong way. Go ahead and snip your lights off and separate the wires. Now you have 3 wires. You have one with a white line, that's your power, a center line, your data, and then the other side is your ground. So you're gonna twist those up. You're gonna put your crimp on those, and your white line goes to your red, which is going to be your power. You can crimp that. Data is your white, which is gonna be your center wire. Outside ground goes to black. Now, before I heat shrink all of these, I'm gonna test the lights to make sure they work. So that way I'm not doing all that extra work just to find out that there's something wrong or I wired it backwards or something. We're checking the lights, make sure that they turn on and they are able to run patterns. And once I have that confirmation, then I'm gonna go ahead and heat shrink these and start snap them into the track. So there's variation types of heat shrinks you can use. You can use a battery powered one, which eats up a lot of power, but you want to be careful with it so you don't overcook the wire. So with this one, the contractors that installed this, they messed up the soffit, but I actually appreciated it because it's actually what you see on the job site, where the soffit is not even, your fascia's at different levels, and you have all sorts of complications that make your installation harder to do. So you have to get creative with your metalwork. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and pre-drill our tracks, because with this one, we are gonna go through the face of our track and we're gonna go up into the soffit. So we're gonna pre-put our screws into the track, go ahead and get them tapped in so that we don't have to do it post, and we can move the wires around them once they're in the track. So let's go ahead and mount this up. Make sure we got the right ones going the right direction. We're going to go ahead and snap our lights in. And we want to make sure, obviously, that the screw that we made is not in the way and not going to hit our wires as we screw these up and in. Okay, the reason that we're going through the face on this one is because the fascia drops down too far, but we also don't typically want to go through the front of the fascia always. Sometimes we don't have an option and we have to go through the front of the fascia. This one we're going to go up through the face, and it's actually going to be what we call leaving it hanging. So our screw is going to be long. We're not going to suck it all the way up to the soffit. We're going to leave it with a little bit of gap so it's sitting flush with the bottom of our fascia board and not up behind it. Behind it is fine, and some customers will want that, but typically you want it flush with the bottom of your fascia board so they can still see the light. So now we're going to get our other piece of track snapped in here real quick. We've already pre-drilled all holes. Get that in, make sure it fits nice and snug. Let's finish off this little roof line. Okay, our piece of track fits in there nice. We only have 2 lights, but we have the strand that's extended. We need to cut those off. Now you can cut these when they're live. Don't just chomp through them if your lights are on, because it will spark and it can short out lights, which makes them faulty, which if they don't go out now, they're gonna go out down the road and you have to replace them. So you can split the wires and cut them one by one without having to get down and unplug your power source. And then what we like to do is tape them up individually, each one, and then tape them together, because you don't want to just tape them all together, obviously, because then you can cause an arc between different wires. So tape them separately, then tape them all together, keeping them away from being able to contact each other. Once we're finished with that and got the end of that line buttoned up, we're going to snap them into our track. Okay, let's go through and do our touch-up work. We have these touch-up paint bottles, whites, all the colors of your track, so you can go ahead and touch those screws up. It's just a nice little finishing add-on. I've seen a lot of different gutter companies that don't paint any of their screws. We like to, since this is high-end finish work. For this scenario, this is what it looks like typically when you're coming down off of a peak. It'll come down and it'll hit a little flat spot and then transition into the next roof line. So there's a specialty cut you want to make here. You want to mark right on that corner where it cuts and changes. And then it's hard to get a true measurement, so you kind of just have to guesstimate a little bit on where that's going to be, and then you'll just be slowly snipping more and more track off to get it fit the right way you want. So obviously I made it a little long because I can't add track back to it, but now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to cut in that little bottom angle piece after I make my marks. But I'm going to do it by cutting the sides and then making a little bend. And then cutting off the extra to be able to make it fit, and cutting out that window cut so the wire can make it around. There's up in there, it's still long, so we got to figure out how much we got to take off of that. It still needs a little bit more off to get that to fit nice and snug. And this is a great practice to get into, of dry fitting it, making sure it fits before you get all the wiring in there and everything that's going to get in your way. Up in there, and then test with the other piece to make sure that it comes down nice and neat, and then now you know you're done. Now that we're all finished and touched up, let's just check over, make sure we don't have any wires falling out of the track. You know, we always have this gap typically, which is normal because we want it to be flush with the bottom of the fascia board, but just checking, feeling along for anything sticking out, because customers will call you back to their house for a wire that's hanging out of the track. So you want to make sure that's secured. But finishing up. Awesome. Thanks for watching, guys. On this little demo tutorial install of a very simple halo system. I went over a few basic things, from wiring up the lights to 90-degree corner cuts and bottom peak cuts. Honestly though, every house is so different with the way you need to attach the track to the home, with different screws you need to take with you on the job, different cuts you have to make, different wiring schematics. So just be aware, you got to be able to adapt, but we're glad we could do a few basic things. Now, we did zone this house out with 2 different zones. It's very simple, and we have videos on that, but thanks for watching.